Throughout time, there have been many intriguing time travel stories. One of the most puzzling accounts deals with a very brilliant Egyptologist, Joseph Bonomi, and a mysterious inventor named Samuel Alfred Warner. Between them, it is rumored they designed and built a real time machine based on secret ancient Egyptian knowledge. Hiding deep within the grounds and shrouded by trees stands a foreboding mausoleum, an imposing 20-foot tall with a pyramid roof. It's made from granite with a solid, heavy bronze door secured by a keyhole. Decorative accents line the door, furthering the air of mystery. The door's margin displays a rectangular strip of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Built in the early 1850s, it was intended as the final resting place of a woman named Hannah Courtois and two of her three daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. Very little is known about Hannah Courtois or about her three daughters, Elizabeth and Mary Ann. But for the last 150 years, they've been at eternal rest in a mausoleum at Brompton Cemetery, West London. During her lifetime, she'd amassed a fortune. Some said she'd been the mistress of kings, politicians, and rich, powerful men. No one knows who fathered her two daughters, but they died soon after their mother, and nobody knows how they died. More mysterious still is the mausoleum, standing 20 feet tall in the middle of Brompton Cemetery, and rumoured to be a time machine. It is rumoured that Bonomi designed Hannah's mausoleum, a theory given some credence by its pyramid-shaped peak and by the mysterious hieroglyphics inscribed on the walls of the tomb and on Bonomi's own headstone. The Victorians were fascinated with the idea of time travel, and some believed the pharaohs had discovered its secrets. Might Bonomi have learned the time travel trick during one of his expeditions to the pyramids? Gently opening the old iron gate of Brompton Cemetery is somewhat similar to breaking the spine of a book containing some secret London history. Well-known suffragist Emmeline Pankhurst was laid to rest here. Beatrix Potter also walked its many plots of land and penned names from gravestones to use in her work, these including decedents Peter Rabbit and Mr. Nutkins. In excess of 35,000 landmarks in all are available, rich and poor, known and forgotten. Hannah Courtois' tomb would be impressive for its imposing stature and cryptic veneer alone. It's the largest, most elaborate construction in all of Brompton Cemetery. But there's more to this story, much more, that it's secretly a time machine. London musician and Courtois historian Stephen Coates, the man behind some of the recent bizarre claims, states it's not a time machine, it's a teleportation chamber. In order to try and interpret the bizarre urban legend that's been constructed around Courtois' tomb, it helps to understand the complex and secretive life of the woman who ordered its construction. Born around 1784, Hannah Peters fled an abusive father at a young age and found work as a housekeeper and as a tavern employee. In 1800, a friend introduced her to John Courtois, a 70-year-old former wig maker in poor health who had made a fortune in the early banking business. Peters was shortly in his employ as a housekeeper. Within the year, she had given birth to the first of three daughters. She claimed they were indeed Courtois despite his age, although some suspected and made it known they believed that the friend who made the introduction, Francis Grosso, might have been the real father. John Courtois' illness is also ill-defined in historical accounts. Although it was rumoured he had a violent run-in with a street worker in 1795 that left Courtois, who had been attacked with a knife, reserved and antisocial. He fell in love with the young Hannah, who took his name and had considerable influence over many of his decisions. Courtois' 1810 will, which initially left most of his fortune to an ex-wife named Mary Ann Woolley and their 5 children, was changed in 1814, so Hannah received the majority of his wealth. Like many Victorians of the time, Hannah was intrigued by Egyptian iconography, particularly hieroglyphics. She believed the Egyptians had a deep understanding of astrology and of their place in the universe, and she invited Egyptologist Joseph Bonomi over to her home for regular visits. Bonomi and Hannah would spend hours discussing Egyptian lore, with Hannah hoping to one day fund Bonomi's expeditions to Egypt so he could further their studies. When Hannah passed away in 1849, she was laid to rest in an expensive, elaborately designed mausoleum in Brompton that paid tribute to her interests. Bonomi arranged for the tomb to feature Egyptian characters and a pyramidal top. Later, Mary and Elizabeth, who never married for fear of losing their wealth to untrustworthy men, joined her. Susanna, her third daughter who married, was buried elsewhere. When Bonomi died in 1878, he arranged for a depiction of Courtois' tomb to appear on his own modest headstone. Whether Bonomi intended it or not, an illustration of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, appears to be looking in the direction of his friend's final resting place. Things appeared to be normal at Brompton for the next 100 years or so. Then, around 1980, the key to the tomb was lost following a visit by Hannah's relatives, and that's when things took a turn for the weird. It was reporter Helen Smith who unsuspectingly wrote an article in 1998. That article may have been the first mainstream story to raise the theory that Courtois' tomb might actually be a time machine. She described the monument as a strange, imposing structure containing 3 spinsters, about whom almost nothing is known, and cited an unheralded author named Howard Webster as perpetrator of the story. Webster claimed his research had excavated a connection between Bonomi and Samuel Alfred Warner, a maverick Victorian genius and fraudster said to have attempted to interest the British Armed Forces in several advanced weapons, too advanced, in fact, to actually exist. Webster thought that Warner's inventive genius may have led him to team up with Bonomi, who supposedly had knowledge of the Egyptian theories of time travel. Together, the two persuaded the wealthy, trusting Hannah to finance their secret project, with Bonomi providing ancient wisdom and Warner adding his breakthrough scientific resources. By strategically placing their device in a cemetery, Warner could guarantee the structure was unlikely to be disturbed over decades or centuries, allowing him to return to London after travelling through time again and again. The fact that the key was missing was pivotal to Webster's tale. Since it had been lost and no one had opened the mausoleum for years, could it be perhaps that Warner was busying himself in a manner similar to an occupant of the TARDIS, travelling from era to era, while Hannah and her family were either entombed or buried someplace else entirely? Webster also claimed that the blueprints for the tomb were missing, which was very unusual for monuments in Brompton. The story slowly gathered momentum over the years. In 2003, an album cover by musician Drew Mulholland illustrated Hannah's tomb and its mysterious construction. This too helped pique the public's interest. In 2011, Coates, a musician with a band named The Real Tuesday Weld, read about Hannah's alleged time machine and became intrigued. He wrote an article on his blog postulating that the Courtois tomb was not a means of time travel, but that Warner had the technology to teleport torpedoes, and that he later adopted the framework to develop a series of teleportation chambers in and around the Magnificent Seven, a group of London's historic private cemeteries. It was a way to move around the city, Coates says. Warner and Bonomi worked together on an ancient Egyptian occult theory and science. I posted that on my blog and it started to take on a life of its own, he said. Coates' premise is a proper study in how an urban legend can proliferate. With the key still missing, it was impossible to disprove the teleportation idea with any real precision, and the mythology allowed for a great deal of speculation. Why did the tomb take 4 years to complete following Hannah's death, which meant she didn't actually enter it until 1853? Was Hannah fooled by the two to fund what she believed would be a time machine? It can be difficult to corner Coates for a precise answer, on whether he believes his fanciful hypothesis about the resting place of Hannah Courtoy. When initially contacted by the Floss online magazine for an interview, he agreed while mentioning that he came up with the whole teleportation system idea as the background to a short story. In conversation, he presents the teleportation springboard as a way for people to make up their own mind about what the tomb might contain. A breath or two later, he expresses doubt that Hannah's daughters might still be entombed there, before wondering whether the mausoleum might be home to a secret subterranean chamber. It's all alternative theory based on historical fact, he says. Opening it may not establish it's not a time machine, Coates hedges. It may just deepen the mystery. For many, the tomb is a slab of rock. The real magic is in their minds.